Welcome to Forensic Friday,
where we examine the intersection of true crime, psychology, and the heart of being human in the middle of it all. So I had this crazy dream last night that's kind of amazing. And I think it's because we talked about Britney Spears over the weekend. I think this is why this happened. So I had a dream that we were watching a Justin Timberlake concert. We're on a roof. I know. I'm already excited, right? It's so
Was
good.
I in it?
Of course you were in it. You were in it and my mother.
Oh, that's so
So you were
fun.
in it. Okay. So we see him. We're on a roof somewhere, right? And we had also been on the plane with him earlier in the day, which is weird. I don't know why we were on a plane and then a rooftop, but that's what happened.
Okay.
So he falls asleep
During this concert?
before. It must have been before or after. See, it's all very weird because he was definitely performing, but then he was like asleep sitting next to us. It was very weird.
Weird.
We had some kind of like exclusive access. I don't know why.
Okay.
So he falls asleep and we sat in front of him waiting for him to wake up. And the minute he woke up, we were telling him about the podcast. Just about the podcast.
Did he love it?
Well, I don't even know because I kind of woke up. But it's funny that was what, like, instead of saying, I love your music, I've listened to you for years, or
I grew up listening to
Britney Spears, or whatever. Right. Not, literally, it was like, so we have a podcast.
You know what? I bet his wife, Jessica Biel, would listen to it.
We should just DM her. I'm not above DMing literally anyone to try to increase our listening base, you know?
We'll just tag them in this post there's no relation to them and what we're talking about today, but we'll just tag them and see how it goes.
Jessica Biel specifically, because I feel like she's a true crime girly.
I also love her. Like Seventh Heaven was my jam.
Oh, I loved it too. The Camdens. I loved it. I used to watch that all the time. It's a little cringy now, but like at the time it was cool.
So cringy, but she was my favorite character.
Absolutely. We have a really interesting case that we're going to delve into. And a lot of people remember pieces of this, but they don't actually know what happened.
Yep.
And that was true for me too. So this is a spree killing that happened in December of 2021 in Denver and Lakewood. And I know, Nat, you and I have talked about the fact that basically there were all these alerts that started going off. And it's in that weird time between Christmas and New Year's when you don't know what's happening. You don't know what day it is.
No.
You know, your pants don't fit. Like it's a time for everyone, right? That week.
Well, I remember because Preston's mom texted us and was like, I hope you guys aren't anywhere near Belmar. That was back when we lived over probably like 7 minutes away from Belmar.
Absolutely.
And she was like, I hope you guys aren't near Belmar because there's a live shooter. And I was like, what? And that the shooter was traveling around Denver, and we lived technically we lived by Sloan's Lake.
Yes.
And so she was just like, just don't go anywhere if you can.
Well, and that's what the alerts were saying. Avoid this area. And then it would pop up somewhere else. Avoid this area. And we're all kind of thinking, what's happening? What's going on? Very weird. Is it related? We didn't know. And I don't know. I mean, I kind of think Colorado in particular is really sensitive to these things because we've had so many
shootings,
situations like this, big shootings. We had a girl a couple years ago threatening a local school. And I'm thinking, this is a teenage girl. And she was maybe in Golden somewhere. Shut down all the school districts, everybody was on lockdown.
Was that girl who came in from Florida?
Yes.
That was so wild.
I was like, why are we so scared of a 15-year-old girl? What is happening? But I think that our community.
And she ended up taking her own life on Mount Evans or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think in Colorado, we know that we can't avoid being vigilant because so many things have happened here. You know? And remind me at the end, I'll tell you something that the trainer said about this case because it was really interesting.
Okay.
And really good to think about.
Okay.
So let me paint a picture for you. So I'm going to tell you a little story about Lyndon McLeod.
Okay.
The date was December 27th, 2021. So again, everybody's just kind of in la la land a little bit coming out of the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
And the very first thing that we know for sure that he did that day is he sent a package to his ex-girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
And in this package are some books and a movie on an SD card
Mm-hmm.
and a note saying to use them to make money. So he sent this package to his ex-girlfriend, Anne. Then he's off. And I don't know the timing of it, but she got the package after he died. So I don't know if he sent it on the way to the first location or first thing in the morning. We'll never know.
Mm-hmm.
But that kind of kicked it off. So he knew exactly what he was going to do this day.
Which is
And
so eerie.
I know, and he knew he wasn't going to survive it.
I mean, she basically got a package from the grave.
Yes. Yes.
Which just creeps me. Like, that would creep me out.
Well, and also he owed her a significant sum of money.
Yep.
So it's weird that he sent this and told her to make money with it. So it's like, did he care?
Right.
Was it a dig at her because she had wanted her money back? Like we'll never know really.
Right.
And that woman obviously has not wanted to be fully identified and all, which I wouldn't either.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
So let me paint you a picture.
Okay.
It's 5:25 at night. It's already kind of dark. There's Christmas lights everywhere. Everybody's
Mm-hmm.
kind of in this sleepy state between Christmas and New Year's.
Yep.
So Lyndon McLeod entered Soul Tribe Tattoo and Piercing on Broadway. He shot and killed the owner,
Mm-hmm.
Alicia Cardenas, and a second victim, Alyssa Gunn Maldonado. He also shot her husband, Alyssa's husband, but several patrons who were actually in the shop assisted him in getting out to an alley and then to a neighboring business, and he survived. So he was injured, but he survived.
Right, right,
His
right.
wife died in the shooting, but he survived.
Yep.
So the 911 calls start because they're hearing these shots go off.
Yeah.
And then McLeod decides to go to Jeremy Castillo's home, which is on 6th Street near Bannock, which is just a couple blocks away from Soul
Yeah.
Tribe, like
Yeah.
pretty close.
Yeah.
And he's wearing a delivery uniform and he approached a door at the house that is not the front door.
Mm-hmm. It was
And
like their back door, right?
it was like a side, it was kind of like a side door.
Side door. Okay.
Yep. And this home had a tattoo studio attached to it because that was Jeremy's work. Jeremy
Yep.
was his personal tattoo artist for
Yep.
years until they had a business falling out. So he shows up and he tells Jeremy's girlfriend, who comes to the door, that he has a package for Jeremy. And the girlfriend just had this sense that something was not right because people don't come to that door. It was very weird that he went to that
Right.
door, right? So she closes the door.
Mm-hmm. Well, she tells him he's not home.
Yeah, she tells him he's not home and she closes the door.
Yep.
And that decision likely saved their lives because he
Mm-hmm.
returned 10 minutes later with a sledgehammer and starts trying to break into their home.
Yep.
They are able to escape. So it was Jeremy, his girlfriend, their 3-month-old child, and a
Mm-hmm.
friend. They had a guest over. They were just doing
Okay.
dinner things. That's it. They were like having dinner. They
Yeah.
got away, thank goodness. But
Well, and what good spidey senses his girlfriend had.
great spidey senses, which we're
Yeah.
going to touch on that later too, because it's super important. But
Yes.
that act right there saved their lives. So they got
Yep.
away. Everybody in that house was safe. They got out.
Yep.
McLeod got into the house with a sledgehammer
Mm-hmm.
and shot up their home.
Yep.
There were bullet holes above the crib. I mean, he
Yep.
shot up the whole thing.
Yep.
And then on his way out, he lit their van on fire on the way out. And he had a fixation with fire, this guy, which is
Mm-hmm.
not uncommon for violent people. But
Yeah.
it's actually kind of amazing he didn't light more things on fire. I think he was too busy driving around town causing a ruckus, but
Right.
he did have a fixation with fire and he burned the van. So then he leaves. So now
Mm-hmm.
there's 911 calls coming from two different locations. The
Mm-hmm.
police are responding to two different locations within a couple blocks.
Yep.
Now people who live in this vicinity are starting to get alerts
Yeah.
because this was too much of a coincidence. They were starting to think this might be connected now.
Yep.
So then he drives over to Cheeseman Park near East 12th Avenue. Do you know where that is?
No.
Cheeseman Park. It's a little more, I feel like it's a little bit east of where he was on Broadway. But he
Yeah, I
drove
don't.
over there, and this is literally 14 minutes later.
Mm,
Police are called again because he shot and killed Michael Swinyard in his house.
that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And what was his beef with him? Do we know
It
that?
was business. Most of these issues were business dealings.
Okay, that's what I
There's
thought.
more detail on some than others. With Michael Swinyard, there's not a lot of detail.
Yeah, yeah,
Most of the targets, though, he had failed business interactions with regarding creating tattoo studios. He really wanted to own one.
yeah.
Know how to tattoo. He's clearly not much of a people person. It didn't go well
Yeah.
for him.
Right.
But boy, did he try. And he held a grudge when it did not work out for him.
Hmm.
So the Denver police in this incident, when he shot and killed Michael Swinyard in that house, police got there quick enough to get a description of the van. So now they have a description of the van, and this is the first clue they had to who was doing this.
Okay.
So now the police are like, okay, we have something. Okay, that
Hmm.
was 5:45. 5:49, officers see the van, okay, and they start to pursue him. This is wild to me. He was driving south on Zuni, which us local people know where these things are. But if you're
Yep.
not in Colorado, just trust it's in like a 10-minute radius, basically,
Yep.
at
Yep.
this point.
Yep.
The police pursue him. The pursuit stopped at a dead end. One of the officers fired at McLeod, and McLeod also fired. McLeod fired near or at the officer's car, so the car was disabled. I
Hmm.
think it's incredibly fortunate that that officer was not killed.
Yes.
But McLeod gets away, drives away
Which
from that
is
location.
so wild
No
to
one was
me.
hurt. He's in a dead end. He
Yeah.
disables the cop car, gets back in his van, and takes off.
And
And he's heading
literally
towards Lakewood.
Janine,
I know.
that never happens.
No,
That's wild that he
no.
got away from a police chase.
And at a dead end. It's not like they were having a high-speed chase down the interstate. Like he literally went into a dead end and was able to get away.
Yeah, that's so wild.
I know. So now there's people, right? I mean, he
Right.
has fired at police officers. He's killed people already.
Hmm.
It's, 5:49, and they are really concerned about him now. So the police are out in droves. This is when even I was getting notices in Aurora. Like,
Yep.
stand down, like
Yeah,
don't
don't
go
go
anywhere.
anywhere.
They didn't know where he was going.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. 5:58 p.m. So that is what? I'm not awesome at math. 9 minutes later, he drove to Lucky 13 Tattoo near West Colfax, and he shot and killed Danny Schofield, who was also a really well-known tattoo artist. He goes by Dan O'Blair. That was kind of one of his nicknames. So he went into Lucky 13 and killed him. And
Mhm.
this is starting to be in that Belmar area. So he's at
Yeah.
Kipling.
Yeah.
So at this point, he drives by Belmar, which, if you're not from Denver, is just a big really nice
Mhm.
shopping center up in Lakewood. And he is kind of by police. He drives by Lakewood police or comes close to them, and they try to contact him in the
Mm.
Belmar shopping center.
Yeah.
And he fired at police. Police fired back. No one's hurt, and he escapes again.
Which is why.
He escaped again, this guy. This freaking guy.
Hmm.
6 minutes later, 6 minutes after he gets away again, he
Hmm.
goes into the Hyatt House Hotel, which is also in Belmar, and he shot and killed the front desk worker, Sarah Steck.
And
And
he did not
this,
have any connection to her.
no known connection to her
Right.
whatsoever.
Right.
And so it's very weird to me. If he wanted to just kill people, there were people everywhere. Like, if you see video from the people in this area, this is a few days after Christmas. Belmar is decorated like so beautifully for Christmas. There's people
Mhm.
everywhere. There were so many people that he could have killed. So I have no idea why he went into Hyatt House and shot her specifically. It's very weird. He had been to that hotel before, so that hotel was known to him, but there's no known connection between
Yeah.
him and her.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's 6:10. Now the police are everywhere. They have swarmed Lakewood, they've swarmed
Hmm.
Belmar, they sort of have him nailed down. So between 6:11 and 6:12, He left the Hyatt house where he killed Sarah Steck, and he's walking now. So he's on foot, which I don't know why that creeps me out more, but it does kind of, that he was
Well,
just walking around.
it's almost like he felt like he could maybe shoot at more people if he was on foot,
Yes.
you
But it's
know?
so creepy, probably because I've seen the surveillance video, but
Yeah.
it's just so creepy that he was just like walking around.
Yeah.
Now, one of the complicating factors is he's all geared up.
Mm-hmm.
He's geared up. He has a rifle. He could look like law enforcement. He wasn't dressed
Right.
up like law enforcement, but he could look a little bit like law enforcement.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are cops everywhere.
Yeah.
So between 6:11 and 6:12, he walks again, kind of in this Belmar shopping center, and he has this interaction with this police officer, Ashley Ferris, female police officer. You can see on the surveillance video, it is upsetting to watch. So,
It's
just fair
very
warning.
creepy.
He comes up to her, they talk for a minute. Then there's this moment where they both step back and kind of look at each other. He fires first, he hits her. She shoots him 3 times on the way down and from the ground around her cop car and
Mm-hmm.
killed him pretty immediately. She hit him
Which
all
is
3 times she fired.
like, I know we're gonna get here,
I know.
but I'm just gonna say it. Like, given, and again, we haven't dug into his history, we haven't dug
Oh
into
yeah.
his mindset or what he believes,
Yep.
but it's ironic that a woman killed him,
Yes, it is.
which we will get to, I know, but
Just
I just have to say it.
terrible women, man. We're everywhere.
Yeah.
But if you watch the surveillance video, the thing that's crazy, and Natalie and I watched it together, and it's just crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You see this whole thing go down, and there's so many people around. There's people in their cars. One
Mm-hmm.
poor guy is literally sitting in his car, and this whole thing happens right in front of his car, and he like does not know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so incredible to me that that police officer was able to hit him 3 times, not hit any bystanders.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see the police come and drag her away and they handle him and whatever. But that is how he was brought down finally.
Yeah.
So in the end, oh gosh, he killed 5 people and wounded the police officer. She was shot in the abdomen, had surgery, but made a recovery, a full recovery. So then the news starts catching up, but they don't know how this is all connected. They don't know if every single thing was him. They're still like trying to piece this all together. But it was really eerie, really unnerving, especially in a community in Denver where we've had a lot of really scary things happen. And I know they happen everywhere, but
Yeah.
Colorado feels like ground zero for some of this stuff. So, as we transition kind of into the psychology of him, he is one of the most fascinating people that I've ever encountered in a
Mm-hmm.
criminal case because
Mm-hmm.
his stuff, first of all, rarely is the stuff so public. So much of his stuff is public. So we have access to all kinds of nonsense of his, but we actually have fairly good information, not necessarily early childhood, you have a little bit, but he wrote so much about himself that we actually have quite a bit.
Yep.
And the other interesting thing that I'll say before we get into this, he actually had a lot of insight
Mm-hmm.
being a mass killer to a degree where the FBI is studying some of his publications that we're going to talk about because it is rare to get this deep of a look into the brain of somebody who actually acts on their
Yes.
ideology.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, you and I kind of briefly discussed this before of some of the things he wrote, but also said in some different interviews and stuff. And it's fascinating. It's fascinating.
Absolutely. So buckle up. We're going
Yes.
to start with some of his early childhood, earlier life experiences.
I don't have any from his actual childhood because I feel like I read in two different spots different things about this, but he either grew up in a cult or he joined a cult at a really young age, like in his
Yes.
early 20s. But I want to say he joined a cult because at some point he felt like they turned their back on him. So he references that later when he's living in some like shipping container. But he talks about how what does he say? He says his tribe betrayed him,
Hmm.
right? So he like talks about his people, like his community as like his tribe, and his tribe betrayed him. And then later on, he talks about his new tribe and how he hasn't tested the boundaries yet of what their loyalty is to him. But he references that. And then it also talks about that he was in his early 20s when he joined this cult. He fell in love with this woman who he started dating, and then she ended up leaving him for another man. It didn't talk a ton about his relationship with her. However, based on his view of women, I can't imagine that this didn't have something to do with it.
It does seem like it left a mark.
Yeah.
It left a bit of a mark.
A really big mark.
A really big mark.
But I did a ton of research into his like family life and all of that, and I could not find hardly anything on his parents, on his
No.
I was curious about his mother because he hates women so much.
Yeah, that does beg a question, doesn't it?
Yes. So he talked about that woman that ended up leaving him for another man, and that had a really big impact on him. And I think, and I didn't hear this from any of the interviews he was in, I think potentially paved part of why he hates women so much.
Yeah. Rang his bell a little bit.
Here's the thing. I think we all have that one breakup, and it's how we handle it.
Yeah.
And
His amygdala is so screwed up, though. On one hand, he feels very deeply, and on other hands, on the other hand, he doesn't feel at all.
Right.
So he is fascinating.
That's what I'm saying, though, is like based on some of the things I saw, some of the interviews he was in, like little clips, I have a feeling, especially when they talked about that early relationship, I think he felt really deeply.
I think you're right.
And then was so damaged, like to a degree that you nor I could understand because our amygdalas aren't that big like his.
Right. You know, to understand that kind of attachment wound? Eminem.
Eminem.
Talking about putting
also
people in
turned it
trunks.
into something a little more productive, but
100%. That's why we like him more.
Yes.
Like full disclosure, this guy is fascinating and I can't wait to tell you more, but we don't like him. Okay, this is not a good human. This is not somebody who has a lot of redemptive things in their life. This was a miserable life. And he made everyone around him miserable too.
Yes, absolutely. The one heart piece that I could potentially have, and it's like teeny tiny, like a penny. It's maybe he was so heartbroken and had no way of figuring out how to deal with it, nor had a healthy or good support system. That's my guess.
He has a brain malformation. I'm gonna blow a hole in that because everybody gets a broken heart. Everybody.
I know.
But I love that you're trying.
I'm reaching.
I know you are putting in work right now, Natalie.
I am.
It's empathy for this guy, and we will keep trying.
Physically hard. I feel like I just ran a marathon trying to say that.
I know it looked hard. I'm watching your face, and I'm like, "Oh, honey, you're trying so hard.
You're trying so hard."
So we know that he wanted to be in the military. That's really what he wanted. I think he saw himself that way, and he wasn't able to do it. And we don't know exactly why, but he was not able to do it. We also suspect that there were some physical issues that may have affected how he saw himself as a man. This could be any number of things. I think that he was overcompensating. That's what I will say. I think he's overcompensating. Also, there are theories because of how closely related his rhetoric is to Eric Harris from Columbine. Eric Harris had a concave chest. So he had plates in his chest and all this stuff, and he was tortured by this as an adolescent boy who's trying to be a man, trying to look a certain way. He was really tortured by that and wrote about it. Eric Harris is another person who has tons of writing. We've been able to study his writing. He left writing and material and videos everywhere. Like there's so many similarities actually between the two of them.
Yeah.
I suspect that there was something wrong with him that he was highly insecure about. Also, we know he had some kind of medical procedure in the months leading up to the shootings, and his girlfriend at the time will not say what the appointment was for. She went with him, took care of him, Will not say what it was for.
I bet it's for Edie. Anyway, moving on. I had to throw something in there.
It's something. And when we're talking later about large sinks, extra large sofas, like weird stuff like that, just,
extra, it's the extra large sink. That's what did it for me.
Might be a projection, but you know what? We don't know. We're not his doctor.
We have no clue.
Purely speculation.
Also, really quick, in one of his books, he wrote, and this relates maybe to his childhood.
Yeah.
I just want to forget this. He said that he was a gifted boy born into a standard family.
Interesting.
So he's had this narrative of himself since he was a kid.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also interesting because basically what happens, and he says this on a podcast, so he gets big in the online manosphere, which we're going to get to in a minute, because the manosphere is a dangerous, dark, lonely, squirrely nook and cranny of the internet that nobody should ever go into.
Nook and cranny.
We're going to talk about the manosphere because I didn't totally know what this was until we researched this. But he had a bunch of failed businesses. And what he said on the podcast with somebody was, he kind of stomached the first 11 failures. Okay. It was the 12th one that put him over the top. So he got so freaking mad at these potential business partners, at the tattoo community, because this is what he wanted. He wanted to make a mark. He did actually start a business. And what happened is he had a big falling out with multiple business partners.
Yeah.
And then this woman, who is one of his main targets, the first victim, Alicia, didn't want to work with him. He wanted to work with her because she's successful and good at what she does and built a business and inspired a lot of people and built a really strong business community, particularly of women. Again, he will use women, which we're going to talk about over and over and over again. He needs women. Women do everything for him. But then he wants to control and dominate and has very little respect for women, which we're going to dive into.
Yeah.
But she would not play ball with him. She's like, nope. She didn't entertain him for 1 minute. And part of that is because she was creating safe spaces for female tattoo artists. Because up until this point, the tattoo scene was kind of a biker scene. And the female tattoo artists were treated really terribly, especially when they were apprentices.
Yeah.
And she just got in. Man, I did love her. We're going to talk about her a lot. But she stood up to this ginormous hulk of an awful human. And she pushed back. She freaking pushed back. And she wanted nothing to do with him. And it infuriated him.
You know what's really interesting? Really quick, this is kind of a side note.
Yeah.
When my brother and I got our tattoos done somewhat recently, we had a female artist. I've only had 2 males that I've gone to. One was for my very first tattoo, and the second male I went to was to touch up my shoulder piece that I originally had done by a woman.
Yeah.
The only reason I didn't go back to her is because she's no longer tattooing. She had a baby, and she's living her best life with her family.
Love that.
But the most recent tattoo I got was by another woman, and I did not realize how women tattoo artists had been historically treated.
Absolutely. I didn't either. It's something I just never thought about.
Yeah, and it's wild because I was like, well, they're artists. Like, I just felt like everyone probably treated them great and respected them. And no, that's not the case at all. So anyway, I had to say that because I just learned about that.
Well, and we're going to talk more in the heart piece about Alicia as well, but she, oh my gosh, the network that this woman created of female-owned businesses is incredible. And one of the tattoo shops that was targeted is actually where I went and got my tattoo done on my 40th. And Natalie came with me and gave me all of her wonderful opinions. It was so great. But it's a tattoo, it's a female tattoo artist only shop.
Yeah.
And it is literally for that, to create safety, but they have to keep their door locked all day because they already have a lot to overcome being a female only shop, which makes me so sad that that's still a thing, but it's still a thing.
Yeah.
But they were targeted in this whole thing and happened to not be there. And so I'm very thankful they're all safe. But she was really this amazing, vibrant, strong woman right in the middle of Broadway. And she drove Lyndon McLeod nuts. She was his literal undoing in so many ways. And
Yep.
I can't help as a woman but be kind of proud of that
Yeah.
on behalf of women everywhere. She's a hero and
Absolutely.
champion, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, failed businesses, he's super entitled, he's super grandiose. So he goes into the nooks and crannies of the internet
Mm-hmm.
and gets connected with a whole bunch of blowhards who think the same things he does. And he even becomes like, I don't know, maybe like third, fourth, fifth in command if there's like a command structure to the Neanderthals online, which by the way, he identifies as a Neanderthal and is very proud of that, which is I find bizarre, but that's fine.
So
He's
strange.
4% Neanderthal and real excited about it. Can you
So
imagine?
weird.
What
So
an
weird.
anyway, he's actually not an idiot. He's actually brilliant. He's just
He is. He's weirdly smart.
I wish he was an idiot.
I
He would
know,
have fought him
same.
quicker and he would have influenced less people. Okay. So Nat, what do you have on the manosphere and some of his beliefs? Because I want to shift and I want you to help us understand how he started to move off grid because his businesses fail.
Mm-hmm.
What happened from there? And then I'll pick up with the books and things.
Yes. So he moves off grid. Well, so let me back up.
This is good.
He loses his house because his businesses all go under. So he
Mm-hmm.
loses his house and he is like basically screw the world. I'm going off grid. So he
Okay, so also the
yeah.
people who bought the house
Uh-huh.
said it was insane.
Oh yeah, like
There
they
were guns like in the toaster oven. Like, I mean, it was wild. Like gold everywhere. I mean,
yes, and he was really challenging to work with,
I can't imagine.
right? Who would have guessed?
Can you imagine working anyway? Wow.
No, I cannot. Can you imagine if he came into our agency?
He wouldn't last 5 minutes.
Or we wouldn't, one of us.
Oh, I like my chances.
Valid.
He would have offended me immediately. I would have
Oh,
pulled an Alicia
absolutely.
and been like, you can take your happy ass home.
Oh,
He wants
absolutely.
what you're selling over here, buddy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So he loses his house.
In the middle of his craziness, before he loses all his work and loses all his money,
Yep.
he had the cops called on him for domestic violence.
Oh, so many times, right? Like
Many times, 11 times.
11 times.
And he would also make death threats. And I don't know if that was before or after he moved into the shipping container. But 11 times is a lot of times to get the cops called on you for domestic violence.
Well, it really is. And then there's an issue in the system as well, right?
Yes. Yes.
One thing that's interesting that I want to point out when we're talking about his domestic violence history, I read something from a woman that dated him
Mm-hmm.
who became friends with the woman who dated him after her. I can imagine there's a network of these people
Oh,
who
I'm sure.
survived this man. She said that the woman who she became friends with, who dated him,
Mm-hmm.
working with abused women in a jail and still fell for him.
What?
And that he had a golden tongue with authorities, meaning he could just get out of stuff. I know.
So disgusting.
It is gross, but he was actually pretty great on his feet and could talk himself out of things.
I believe it though.
I know I do too.
I believe it. That's why the cops were called 11 times and nothing ever happened.
100%.
The FBI also had to check him out because many times because of all the death threats he would make.
Yeah.
So he moves into this shipping container.
Tell him about the storage container he moved into.
Yes. So he literally moves into the storage container off the grid and builds a house out of it and basically says, let me see if I have the quote.
Oh, I hope you do because it's so insane.
Oh my gosh. Says something along the lines of he moved into a small space with zero storage because storage is for women's crap and he doesn't have room for that.
No.
But, and then he said, people who make these tiny homes try to tend to make everything tiny.
Mm-hmm.
But his idea was to make everything inside big because he doesn't need room for storage. He literally just needs room to store his meat, to sleep, and store his guns.
Mm.
That's it. So the sink.
The sink. Tell him about
The
the sink.
sink. He creates this sink and literally says a child or a small woman could
It's so
stay in the
specific.
sink. It's that big.
That's just like an unhinged thing to say because he
Like,
was
what the
that
actual heck
specific.
does that mean?
I mean, he bathed a small woman in there. That's what that tells me.
Gross.
Ugh. I can't. He's terrible.
He's
Terrible.
a whole thing.
And
So, I mean,
the irony is not lost on me that here's a man who hates storage almost as much as he hates women, but is living in a literal storage container. But he has
with
a massive sink because he might have tiny other things. I'm telling you, he is just a study in contradictions, this guy.
I, maybe he thought it was funny in his own brain, where
Does
he's
he
like,
seem like someone who has a good sense of humor?
no.
No.
Anyway, so he also says in relation to women,
Mm.
right? So this fits with like only women need storage, and that's stupid, basically.
Hmm.
He also says women are promiscuous with their heads in the clouds.
Mm.
So, like, it just lines up with his whole
Women are
view.
promiscuous all on our own. We sleep with ourselves.
We sleep with ourselves, our
Hmm.
heads are in the clouds, we
Hmm.
need storage for all of our crap.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
anyway, so
100%.
literally moves into a storage container, has no storage aside from trying to store his meat, but I think he would just keep that outside because it was cold most of the time.
I think he either has guns or a woman in the sink at all times. That's kind of where my brain goes.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
where else is he going to put it? Because, storage. Do you think at
Imagine.
any point as he opens the door to his storage container house that any part of him went, maybe I should rethink my stance on storage? Do you
No,
think?
no.
Probably not.
I mean, he's smart, but not that smart.
Maybe just not insight on that front, potentially.
Yes. Yes.
So on the books,
Hmm.
plural. I'm only going to give a little bit
Okay.
of information about the books, but I think it's really important to talk about because this is kind of unprecedented. So it is not uncommon for mass killers to leave writings of many different types,
Hmm.
journals,
Hmm.
whatever, videos, voice memos, whatever. They tend to do that. The thing that's very weird about his stuff is he published, self-published basically, 3 volumes of a book that he called Sanction.
Hmm.
He wrote it under the pen name Roman McClay, but the main character's name was Lyndon.
Mm.
The first 4 words of the book are pain demands a response, which is so interesting and just gives me goosebumps every time I think about it.
Yeah.
Now, the length of these books, Nat, his 3 volumes of Sanction are as many pages as the entire Harry Potter series, plus 3 additional books the same size as your average Harry Potter book. That is just an unbelievable
Hmm.
amount of information. And that's why the FBI is studying it because he put so much interesting stuff in these books.
Hmm.
He published them between 2018 and 2020. So again, the killings happened in 2021.
Yep.
And it is a foretelling of the crimes. So I'm going to give like a tiny bit of detail about each book because they build. And what people have said is the shootings was the final act of the book.
Yeah.
And he may have felt almost morally compelled to do the shootings to finish his story,
Yeah.
kind of life story. So the very first book, and I just find this very interesting, it was considered science fiction, like a science fiction trilogy. That's what it's considered.
Hmm.
The first book, Sanction One, was ranked number 16 in genetic engineering science fiction. Try that on for size.
Hmm.
But number 50 in dystopian fiction. So when you think about it, his books actually had a little bit of traction. I mean, they're not New York Times bestsellers,
Right.
but in the Manosphere, his stuff was actually fairly popular. And he
Yeah.
would go on podcasts and you can find interviews with him and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you're a woman, I warn you, it will ruin your whole day and you will get very angry, but they do exist. So, Sanction, the second volume, His character, Lyndon in the book, commits a mass shooting, and he described it vividly and with, quote, morbid enthusiasm. So he actually describes the shooting specifically at Jeremy Castillo's house,
Hmm.
what he wanted to do. And what he wanted to do was show up in tactical gear and have a total of 225 rounds in waiting and 47 bullets loaded into his two weapons. That's how
Hmm.
like specific he was about how he wanted to kill basically everyone in that house. And if there were people tattooing in the tattoo studio part of the house, he would have killed them as well and had a whole vision of how that would go down. So, couple things about his brand of Manosphere that really came out in the second book. He was a white supremacist. He used racial slurs in his work. He was anti-Semitic. Ironically, he thought it was wrong for people of other races to rape white women. However, when he talks about rape himself, and this is actually in the beginning of the third book, he talks about, and I quote, the things women won't admit about rape, that it slakes, that it enthralls, that if done by a certain type of man, they don't hate it at all.
I hate him.
I know. I'm with you, friend.
That's horrible.
Yep. And then, and this is what's so weird, he talks about the prospect of a race war, but says the reason that that would happen is because white men are being prevented from defending their women and their own honor. How twisty is that?
I like can't even say I'm speechless.
I know you hadn't heard
Speechless.
that. I was like, I got a quote for you. There's one review, and this gave me the chills too when I heard this. So you can see the reviews for these books, and very few people are like, this is terrible, right? Most of them are cheering it on, but this one really stuck with me. Quote, Sanction is an epic, visceral journey into the dark heart of every man broken by society, chewed up and spit out. So there is a whole underworld of men who feel like they have been reduced to this,
Wow.
that they have to show up in this manner to take back their respect.
Mm.
And the only other thing on the books that I'll share is that there were 46 murders in the book. He used people's actual names in the book. He said
Yeah.
that to be a man is to call people out by name. So in the book, he is the main character, and the people he kills are real people with real names.
Yeah.
So if there were 46 people that would have been murdered, there was literally a list of people that were on his list.
Yeah.
And law enforcement didn't do anything with that list.
Mm-hmm.
So that takes us through the books.
Mm.
Nat, I wanted you to shed light on the film because he really worked on that kind of in the months leading up to the
Mm-hmm.
shooting.
Mm-hmm. I don't know a ton about the film because once one it got released for like a super short time, and
Uh-huh.
then once he killed everybody, it got taken down.
Mm-hmm.
So in a video that I watched, it shows small clips of it.
Yeah.
They're really all the film was really of just him
Mm,
riding his motorcycle next to trains, drinking whiskey, looking intimidating.
mm.
There wasn't a ton from what I gathered that like I mean there was a ton in the film, but I there's no access to it. I can't see the film.
No, one of the things that it says was in the film was he actually parked his van in front of the Castillo's home, loaded his guns
In the film?
in the film, and
Oh
walked
gosh.
around with a mask on, like a ski mask on, just like he did in the book.
Oh my gosh.
And they filmed it. And an interesting thing is that girlfriend, Anne, the one that he
Yes.
sent all of this stuff to,
Helped
um,
him film it.
she helped him film it. And actually, I read an article where she thought this would help him. She thought he was depressed. And
Mm,
she thought that putting this into art, making this video, making this film called War Horse, and it's
mhm,
47 minutes long, she thought that might help his down mood and how he was feeling.
mm,
So it was kind of her idea. She was trying to channel some of his mess.
mm.
which is crazy to think about.
Yeah. I have some information on his relationship with Anne.
Oh, go for it.
They started dating after he was living in that shipping container. So there's part of me that's like, did she sleep in the sink? I have no clue.
Oh, it's poor thing.
But they dated for a little bit. And at first, right, kind of like what you were saying earlier, he was real smooth, really slick with his words, really schmoozy. And then over time, some of his true colors started to come out.
Mm,
And at one point, he ended up striking her across the face. So they decided to take a break. It didn't say much as to like what that conversation was like. She's kind of gone dark
yeah,
since everything's happened.
I can't
Um,
for that.
but so he struck her across the face. They took a break and she went home. But before she went home, she gave him $20,000, her van, and her motorcycle to
Mm,
help him finish filming. So
mm.
the film wasn't done by the time they broke up or like split or took a break.
Oh man.
So she left. He like went rogue. He ghosted her and
Mm,
never got back in contact with her. And then she found out, I think like a week or two later, that he had stolen an additional $37,000 from her and then also stole money from their friends through like crypto and all
mm,
that. And then it also came out that he was grooming other young girls online and continued to try to steal more money. And during all of this, we haven't really touched on this piece yet, is he was struggling with an opioid addiction from a crash that he had gotten into years before, a
that's
motorcycle
right. I
accident.
forgot about that. That's right.
So there's a lot to this guy, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, psychopath, sociopath,
Mm,
really significant motorcycle accident
mm-hmm.
where he became addicted to opioids. And, he tried, from what it sounded like with his relationship with Anne,
Mm,
she really believed that he cared about her,
mm.
right? He held up some front, or maybe did care about her, who knows,
Well, I mean, he sent her all of the stuff at the end
to make
to make
money, quote
money with it,
unquote.
which is weird because there is a part of me that wonders if on some level he felt like he owed her something because he had just taken tens of thousands of dollars from her.
Yeah.
There may have been some kind of wonky attachment there.
Yeah.
He went to the M&M School of Attachment, but you know,
And
but
then Eminem kicked him out and was like, bro, you're too much for me.
way too much. It's interesting that because when I think about the heart of this one, there's two things that really, really, really stand out to me. The first is just the behaviors, warning signs, all of that, because the red flags were numerous. And law enforcement, I don't know what options they had because when he went off grid, I don't think they could find him very easily. However, he
Mhm.
was also posting content. So
Mhm.
I have to imagine that the FBI probably could have found him
Yes.
if it was that important to them at that time.
Yes.
The thing that's so hard is one of the things Jeremy Castillo told me news outlets was, I wish I could have known. If I knew this guy was coming for me, he said two things. Number one, I might have moved, but also I would have killed him.
Mhm.
When he came to the door, if I knew to be vigilant about
Mhm.
people coming to my door, I might have just shot him through the door.
Yeah.
And he goes, I wouldn't have wanted to be a part of that. That would have been awful. But I would have probably killed him if he showed up at my
Yeah.
house like that and
Yeah.
ended the whole thing. There was a roommate who spoke up and said they tried to get him into a hospital at one point because of this homicidal stuff that he was
Mhm.
talking about,
Mhm.
and they wouldn't keep him at the hospital, which you and I know is real. I mean, we've sent people to the hospital. We've put in work sometimes to try to get people what they need at the hospital, and they
Mhm.
get turned away. They get turned
Yeah.
away or released
Yeah.
pretty quickly because there
Yeah.
aren't beds or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Or they tell them a different story.
Yes.
That's been true before too.
And I think there is tremendous power in listening to that intuition, that little part of you that says, this doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
and not overriding it. And the girlfriend
Hmm.
saved them because she listened to that.
Yeah. Well, and what's really interesting is in some of his earlier interviews, even like short clips,
Mm-hmm.
he would say things like, I have these thoughts, so they're a part of me.
Yeah.
And I know that they're not right, but they're still a part of me. So do I accept all of me or do I deny these parts of me? And so
Yeah.
he really, it seemed like in some of these earlier
Mm-hmm.
clips, probably before he really, really, really lost his mind,
Yeah.
that he was really wrestling with these homicidal thoughts
Mm-hmm.
and these books that he wrote. Like it really sounded like he wrestled with it because he would talk about, do I accept all this part of me, like all these parts of me, or do I deny all these parts of me? So there is this, again, really tiny piece of me in the heart of all this that's like, maybe to some degree, those were in his mind cries for help
Yeah.
of like, I don't know what to do with this. I'm wrestling with this.
It's kind of what we saw with Eric Harris,
Hmm.
where there's a little bit of like, I'm not thinking like everybody else. And
Hmm.
I know that. And there's some part of me that knows that's not good, but also I am God. Like it's like this weird
Hmm.
combination of I love me and I hate me.
Well, it also reminds me of the James Holmes
Yeah.
case
Yeah.
because there's, and we'll get into a whole thing with him
Oh, we
also.
have big
Big
plans for
plans,
that
but there was a part of him, made a phone call, and again, we'll get into him, but he made a phone call before he went into that
one.
movie theater, reaching out for help, and something happened to where he wasn't able to talk to his therapist or a someone on the
Yep.
crisis hotline.
Yep.
Something happened to where it just didn't work.
Yep.
And he ended up saying screw it and went in. So it feels very similar to that of
Uh-huh.
I'm saying these things to somebody else on a video
Yep.
and no one's raising the flag, or if they are, it's nothing's happening. I'm not going into any psych ward. I'm not getting arrested.
Mm-mm. So it does beg that question of was there potentially
Hmm.
room for this to be prevented? And I think from a law enforcement perspective, yes.
Hmm.
In
I would
terms
agree.
even of notifying victims, like I just think potential victims.
Yes.
If somebody was writing about my demise, I would that would be helpful information. I would like to know.
Right.
I
Right.
might do some things differently in my life if I knew that.
Right.
But I don't think we can close this episode out without talking about Ashley Ferris
Mm-hmm.
and Alicia Cardenas a little bit more. So tell us about Officer Ferris.
So she really struggled herself with
Yeah,
her mental health
yeah.
and struggled with, I believe, from what you and I talked about, and also what I read, suicidal thoughts.
Well, leading up to.
Oh, leading up to. Okay, so that's the part that I was confused about.
Oh, you know what? You don't know this part because I learned it in the training.
Yeah, so you tell us about this.
Okay.
I do remember reading some about her and her mental health. I just don't know the timeline.
So here's the thing about Officer Ferris. She was 3 years in to her career as a police officer, and she was actually suicidal the night before this happened. She felt like she just didn't have purpose and meaning, and she just couldn't really understand why she was here.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was suicidal. She wasn't sure, but you know what? She stayed. And the next morning she went to work. And actually, it's so smart that she went to Belmar. She kind of had a feeling she was getting this information. They were trying to set up a perimeter. And she was so brave. She was so brave, like all the officers were who responded to this. Like, who wants to go stand on the sidewalk and keep an eye out for a shooter on foot?
Right.
Shopping center.
Well, and she was by herself.
And she was by herself. She was by herself. So she showed up, she stayed here. She didn't end her life. She goes and handles her business. with this gigantic man. Like when you see him
he's
standing next
huge.
to her, he's huge. He's 2 to 3 of her.
Yes.
I mean, really, it's
Yeah.
wild. Like she could have been standing on her own shoulders and probably would have been eye to eye with this guy. Like he's massive. And her reaction time, how she handled herself, her wherewithal, her accuracy, all of the things to take this man down before he hurt who knows how many more people. She is just an epic, epic hero. And so the thing that's so cool about her is she started a foundation after all of this happened, and she tries to help first responders who are suicidal.
Mm.
So she has this whole like really positive message about just stay here. Don't end your life. You never know what's coming around the corner. And she's an incredible human being and so brave. And when you see her in that surveillance video, just laying on the ground, having taken this guy out, you're just so struck. And I have to say, it is poetic justice
Yeah,
that
it
this
is.
woman took out Lyndon McLeod because it
Well,
had to be a woman.
yeah, well, there's so many components to that, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, it had to be a woman who took him out. Like,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, you MFer. Like,
Oh, took his ass out.
yes. But then also to choose to stay and go to work and then also having near death experience the next day.
It's wild. I mean, you can't
That's
write. This is stranger than fiction.
stranger than fiction.
You can't make this stuff up.
Mm-mm. Nope. It's heartbreaking that so many lives were lost and impacted, and that she decided to stay
Mhm.
and end the spree.
Yes. Yes. And for our friend who we never got to meet,
Mm-hmm.
Alicia, what a beautiful soul.
Mm-hmm.
And the impact, I forgot, I read somewhere there's like 24 female-owned businesses
Mm-hmm.
within a few blocks of her on Broadway.
Mm-hmm. That's so cool.
She has left a tremendous legacy, and I hate so much that her life was cut short, but what she lacked in time,
Mm-hmm.
she made up for in impact. And I'm so thankful that she walked this earth and did all the wonderful things that she did,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us. This is a heavy one and kind of an obscure one, but
Mm.
so, so, so interesting. And I hope for our Denver listeners that this sheds a little more light on that really scary day in 2021, right after Christmas, when our phones were blown up telling us to stay home.
Yeah.
This is what was going on behind the scenes.
Yeah. And my biggest encouragement is give the people you love some love.
Give them some love. Oh, and here's the other thing. This is what I was gonna trying to remember to say is in the training when I
Mm-hmm.
learned some of these details,
Mm-hmm.
what was really emphasized was we're all on duty.
Mm.
And what that means is don't shut up. When you see, if you get anything from this podcast, I hope you learn how to protect yourself and your
Mm-hmm.
loved ones,
Mm-hmm.
how to have a little bit more empathy and understanding for people,
Mm-hmm.
how to stand up for yourself
Mm-hmm.
in an appropriate way,
Mm-hmm.
and say something.
Say something.
Freaking say something. If you see anything like this, if you read something, if your family member or friend goes off on a thing, like please, please use your voice. And if they don't listen the first time, do it again and again and again.
Yep.
Says the girl who follows people around if there's some nonsense going down. So, you don't necessarily have to get as involved as me or Natalie might, but just
Mm-hmm.
say something and don't shut up until somebody listens because you never know what you can prevent.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank y'all for listening. We're going to drop a couple really good midweek episodes in the next couple weeks too. So keep an eye out for those. And as always,
We'll see you next time, our forensic friends.
bye. I'm Janine.
And I'm Nat.
And as always, thanks for listening and join us next week for more crime, psychology, and heart.